Welcome back to Open Line. Vance, as I asked before the break, would you start us off here talking about contemporary worship space design?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. The traditional way to design a space, and particularly a worship space, is to start from the outside and work your way in. A lot of times the architect will start with what the exterior elevation of the building looks like. They'll have a certain amount of square footage that they need to provide, so they'll draw a shell, and they'll worry about the inside stuff later. And then they'll start with the outside. And the problem with that is you end up throwing into the inside of the building stuff that you may or may not want or that may or may not work. And most of the time it actually doesn't work. So what we're trying to do these days is we're trying to start from the inside and work our way out. We're starting, most churches, the most important function that they perform in that space is preaching. And then secondarily to that is worship, and then all the other activities that go on in that space, whether it's drama, special music, whatever it might be. Those functions are there designed to support presenting a message and communicating to people. So the most important thing, if the most important thing is preaching, then the relationship between that preaching location and all the seats in that room, it's a critical relationship, and how that works. A lot of pastors are wanting to have a room that feels like their living room. They want it to feel like a small group meeting in their living room. And in order to get that sense of intimacy, it's very difficult from a room design, and you just can't do it with a very large flat floor room with a sea of people sitting in seats. You have to be creative with the way the room is designed. So that's kind of what we're really trying to do, is start from there, start with what the program is, what the functions are going to take place in there, do a detailed matrix of each function and what the technical requirements are going to be, what the architectural requirements are going to be, what the sound, lighting, and video requirements are. And once you have that matrix set up, then you start designing the room based on what you're going to need it to do. And then as you go along, if something in your design will not satisfy that criteria, then you find another solution that'll meet that criteria. And that's not to say that the room can't be aesthetically pleasing and architecturally rewarding, because certainly those things can happen as well. And in fact, there's a lot of very innovative things you can do with architecture, with ambient lighting, with all kinds of other things that a lot of times people say, no, you can't do that. But again, if you get a team together who's innovative and who considers all these issues, then they can really do some creative things in the design that'll head off all those problems that you're going to have to fix on opening day or the first year after opening day.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead and jump right in.
No, I just want to feed off of that, because Vance is exactly right, and the relationship between the architect and the church today is something that, it needs to be focused on a lot of times, because sometimes there's misunderstandings there. The architect's trying to satisfy one thing and the church needs another. In dealing with acoustics, I'm going to hand this over to our Bob here in a second, because I am not at all near an expert in that field at all, but I do know this, that there is a distinct difference, especially dealing with the churches that are hitting the more contemporary areas, changing from traditional into a more contemporary format, the dynamics of the worship, the dynamics of bands up on stage, the type of music they play, again, the dramas, as Vance was saying. And there, I believe, is a distinct difference between an acoustician that can satisfy a space, and the difference between that and an acoustician that can satisfy a church environment. Because that acoustician that knows the church environment will take every element that's going to happen within that service, be it, one or two things at the beginning. They're going to ask the church where they're going, what the focus is, and that way he can design the acoustics around there to meet those needs for that. And I yield to Bob on that.
Well, I would totally support that idea. One of the major issues for me when I'm in the design process is exactly like Vance. We start off with the programming. We want to know what is going to happen there. One of the things that I do during the programming session is that I ask questions that are based upon basically three goals. Number one is the 5-year plan, number two the 10, and then finally a 20-year plan. I want to know what the pastor's vision for the church is. Because the key to our responsibility is we are implementers of the pastor's vision. The way I understand the Word of God, he speaks to the pastor, he gives the pastor the vision, and then the pastor conveys that to the committees or to the other people that are working with him to get the building built. And we're just implementers of that vision. There's three things that I would say that are crucial at this juncture of the design. Whenever the acoustician is brought in, and preferably Vance and I both would be the type that want to be there when they're still scratching bubbles on a napkin. It is much better if we come in and there are not drawings, because it makes the whole process work smoother. So it's not unusual at all for a firm to hire myself or Vance ahead of the architect. It's happened quite a few times. And there are some architects I know that when they're hired, they immediately bring us on board, even though they were there first, but they realize our importance. And that's a critical issue. But when this process starts to take place, and we go through programming, the next thing that we do is we start developing the room, because the three elements of sound, both the noise control, the physical acoustics, and the electronics, all play together to create that imagery that we hear that we call sound. And the room is very important. One of the next step that our firm takes, though, is a little bit unusual in that we then go to the 20-year goal. Once we've got a pretty good idea what the room is going to be like, we go to the 20-year goal for all of the ministries for the next 20 years or more for the building. And we immediately start working on the infrastructure to provide for those ministries. That is the conduit. That might be the power drop coming into the building from, wherever the power source is. It might be because they want a lighting system. They want to do drama one day. If we're designing the lighting system, we're very careful that, we know they're expensive. And we know that when we start dealing with budgets, which is the very next step, that some of these things may not be in there today. The day you open the door, you may not have X, whatever X that widget happens to be. But as long as we have provided the proper infrastructure, the power, the conduit, space allocation, and structural to hold it, then we know that when the time comes and the money is provided, be that a year away or 20 years away, that the building will be ready for it, and the ministry then can go on. So to me, the important step is when I'm involved in the project, and then secondly, I want to know the 20-year plan, the big vision, and then provide that infrastructure. And then we start talking about budgets. What can you do today, and what do you have to put off to the future?
Yes, very good point. Dave, please add.
Again, the hiring of the consultant is going to be the church's best move at that point, because what's going to happen is that consultant can go in, talk with the architect one-on-one, and educate at that point, especially the architects that are trying to understand what the church is trying to accomplish here. They can go in and bridge that communication gap and make that happen. It's a source that's outside of the church, so they don't necessarily feel intimidated, and yet they're willing to learn, hopefully, about that. And I imagine that most agree here, and if they don't, please tell me, but when you are going to apply technical tools in the church environment, you almost, in a sense, have to build the church around those tools, because you can't really put those in very well at all once that facility has been built.
Gary, let me toss in on this real quickly, because I want to make this point before we run out of time. One of the really important things for any church to do today that's considering a building process is to start looking today and finding sources of information. That's crucial. If it's something like the conference that we're having here, that we have people come here that listen to our teaching, they're gaining information. If it's magazines like Technologies for Worship and other magazines that are out there that provide sources of information. If it happens to be the different websites that have different things. That's one of the reasons on my website I keep all the articles I write and let people download them free. The idea is just to provide information, and I've had architects go there and pull the articles, and it's got a lot of the fundamentals of design in it. And if they understand that when we start the design process, it makes everything go a lot smoother.
Bob, if you would please, give us your web address.
Oh, gee. It's just my name. It's rbobadams.com. It's just that simple, rbobadams.com.
Great. Some other resources, and I appreciate
that.
lead in here that are available would be the Technology for Worship Ministries, which is hosting this conference here. Their website at www.tfwm.com. A friend of most of ours up here, Kurt Typley, has a great ministry, churchsoundcheck.com, where a person can log on, and it's a listserv that's available, and you can post your question, and a lot of us belong to that listserv and do respond to that, as well as numerous other sources that do exist. Open Line will break at this time, and when we come back, we're going to be taking questions from our audience that we have assembled here at the Inspiration Conference.